videos of the messages, and we have been getting good response from them, from people that have been watching it. So we're really glad that we are able to do this now and to put this on our site, on Facebook site, and Scott's been recording them. And so we need to understand that this is not just a message God gave me to share with you, which he did share with me, but to share with anyone that it touches at their heart, from Facebook land and from YouTube. I'm not sure if this is on YouTube, but this can be very far-reaching. And so we're just not a little light in this community anymore. We're a light to whoever finds our page, looks at our stuff, and listens to our messages. And so that's why we're here. This is why we're doing it, to be our little light, bread of life. And so our message this month, our theme, well, actually it's not this month totally, but the next few weeks and this week is Bah Humbug to Merry Christmas. From greed to generosity is what our topic is today. David spoke a little bit about it. He talked about a little bit about the creator of the Christmas Carol and how it was dysfunctional, and so he wrote this book and how it impacted. I'm going to share a little bit about that. But I want to know, how many here have ever said bah humbug during a Christmas season? Has anybody said that? Yeah, a couple of you. Yeah. Some people have, and if they haven't said it, like bah humbug, like, oh man, they might have used other words, or their inside was different than their outside, and they might have internally said it. And I know that I have. I'm just as guilty as anybody else. And so we're going to be talking about this a little bit. But this book that was made in 1843, okay, I'm not sure what happened, 1843, December 19th, which is what, that's going to be our Christmas program. So many years ago, this book was written. This book, when people got a hold of this book, it affected their life profoundly. This was written in England during a very difficult time. The 1800s were very difficult, so oppressive in England. A lot of you might have heard about have you ever heard of Oliver? Oliver? Yeah, it was during the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was just a very oppressive, religious oppression, as well as oppression where people thought they were better than other people. And so this book had an impact, and there was more generosity because of this book during this time and afterwards. And famous people got on the generosity bandwagon. And thousands upon thousands of people were affected by this simple book. This book that a simple person wrote. So you never know what an impact we're going to have. So one of the things about this story, how many here have never heard the story of the Christmas Carol? Okay, so everybody has heard it. And you know it's about a miser. Well, the origin of the word miserable starts out with miser. And to be able to be a miser. A miser is a tightwad, somebody that's stingy. There's a lot of other words for them. Can you think of them? You know, and today, nobody ever calls it. Anybody you have heard the word miser today? We don't say, oh, that person's a miser. What do we say? That person is so stingy. You know, or tightwad or whatever. Very, very protective of their resources, and they're not willing to share much because they like to hoard their resources. Hoard and keep it to themselves. And what they have found is that most people who are misers or stingy, they are miserable. Very few people who are generous are miserable. More people that do not share. And a lot of us have learned to share in what grade? Kindergarten. First grade. We learned to share. Well, somehow he missed it. And so most of his life, he had a very tough life. This guy, miserable, bah, humbug, no, I'm not going to share. I have met so many people like that. I've seen so many people like that. I saw some horrendous footage of what happened on Black Friday. Did anybody see on the news some of these people that were trampling other people for the buys of a lifetime? Did anybody see that? I saw some of those things, and people had no consideration for other people because they had to get the best price. They knocked kids over, people over, frantic, frenzy people for a buy, for a good price. And so, this is what his life was like. And as you know, the story of his life was about how miserable he was, how he was stingy with everybody, how he was at a school where he hardly ever went anywhere. He was at a boarding school and finally got to go home in his teen years. And then he had a love of his life. That love of his life took off, did not have the love of his life. And then he became partners, and he said, forget it, I'm first. He had a partner that thought the same way, Marley, and that's what the whole story is about. And so both of them were miserable together. Misery usually likes company. And so people, when they're doing this thing, they were miserable together. And the things that they said and what's written in that book is horrendous. People would come and ask for donations. No, and they said, well, don't you care about the poor? Don't you care about these people? And so one of the guys said, they could die. Oh, good, might as well. Riddance. Less poor people in this earth. Might as well let them die. I'm not giving to them. It'll curb the population. That's what their thinking was. So they did not even want to help anybody. And so as people become like this, they're so tunnel vision, self-focused and self, that they have a hard time looking outside. And so he goes through a journey. He goes home and he has what some people can consider a dream. If it was in today's, we would look at it, it could be a parable. If Jesus were talking and say, you remember that story? That was a great story it wasn't about sheep, wasn't about goats, wasn't about somebody's farm. It was about reality and how reality could be here in Platteville. And so it was like a parable, a story with a lesson. And you know what? When I was growing up, I did not like this story. I didn't like about the ghosts. I didn't like about the ugliness. I heard about the Tiny Tim. But you know what? When I was growing up, I never wanted to see the movie or read the book. People were talking about it, but I wasn't going to. So, of course, now I'm watching the movie. And the whole ghost thing with some people is they don't like it. It's, all creepy and or it represents something. But, if you want to know about ghosts, I'd be more than happy to have a Bible study with you about that. But the object of this story isn't about the ghosts. It's about somebody's heart and how cold it was and how stony it was and how much he didn't like people. I see that on Facebook all the time. Negativity, how people don't like people. Around, you just have to go, to different places, and it's all around us. And so the story goes on about his past. He was looking at it, and nostalgia kicked in. And he was looking at his past as a kid and thinking, oh, wow, yeah, I did have a blessing. I forgot all about that. Sometimes we forget about the blessings because we're so focused on the negative or the ugly. Forgot about the blessing. And then he was at the present, and he was seeing about the family. He had just fired his worker, and they're just happily going about and having family and being blessing each other, and they're all excited. And Tiny Tim, and he was touched by their family life because he didn't have one. And he saw, gosh, I just fired this guy, and he's still happy? How is that possible? And everybody's excited, and he went and they bought all this food because he had just gotten his paycheck. And that's the present. But it wasn't his present because he was miserable at his house. And so started churning this little bit of wow, could be different. And then he sees the future, and the future's bleak if he doesn't do something. He has no friends, nobody cares about him. Tiny Tim dies because there's no money to help him with his thing. And there he is again, the future. He didn't like it. Sometimes God gives us dreams. Sometimes God speaks to us in different ways. And so this is what happened. So through that little journey of his, of what was reality, what was today, and what could be the future, it impacted him. And sometimes we're so busy, sometimes we don't even think about things like that. Until it's too late. But this story, and that's why it impacted so many people, and that's why so much generosity, is because it impacted. God spoke to this miser's miserable heart. And he was all excited, and he went to the house. And something changed. And somehow, some of my typing didn't come out. So tell me, did the environment change? No. Like Platteville. Still growing, we still go to Walmart, went somewhere. I'm still going to find people I know. People are going to give me their woes, their excitement. Things hadn't changed in the little town he lived in. What changed, what made the big difference, was his outlook and his heart. And that's what made the difference of this story. It impacted people's hearts. And so as we look at this, let's look at this and see, where are we today? We're going to put on a Scroogeometer, and we're going to look at ourselves and see, where are we in our journey? And so as we're thinking about ourselves, what word describes the old Scrooge that you would like to leave behind? And his happened to be stinginess and money. But maybe it is our time. Maybe it's our resources. Maybe it's our thoughts. Maybe it has to do with our, things that we're doing at work. Where it's all tunnel vision. It's all about us. It's all about central focus. And God's trying to say, hey. So where is it? What word describes the old Scrooge that you would like to leave behind? Some emotion that is unhealthy. Some memory that has taken us captive every Christmas time. Do you know how many people I've met that all they can do is think about all the people that died during Christmas time? The month of December? So that they've already settled, they're going to be miserable. They've already settled that they will not allow love and joy and peace into their hearts because they can't even fathom those things in their heart during Christmas time. But that's where we can see what word describes the new Scrooge that you would like to become. God worked on Scrooge's heart. That's all a story in a fairy tale. Not a fairy tale, but it could have been real. He might have, the person that authored the book could have seen this actually happen. But this is what happens today when people allow God to work in their hearts. So this is a trailer of what happened in Florida. Some of us knew this.
But if you are going to leave now.
At least 20,000 people are trying to find food and water.
In every one of us.
We should give them some of the water we got. I'll bet everybody in the neighborhood has lots of water like us.
There is the power to do great things.
That's not all, Mom.
Okay.
Some of us discover it
3 truckloads, and Zach's not done yet.
sooner than others.
Look at their faces. You did a good thing here.
Hey, where's your home?
Ain't there no more.
Based on a true story.
You know what I'm gonna do?
Now what?
I'm gonna help homeless kids.
No matter the obstacles.
I just wish we had room for them all.
If you believe in your yourself.
We could do something big.
What?
Walk across America to raise awareness about homeless kids.
Do you know how far that is?
And refuse to give up.
I guess when you find out what these kids are going through, it's hard not to do something.
Nothing is impossible.
He is probably the youngest founder of any non-profit organization that you will ever meet.
From the director of Rudy and Hoosiers.
Not only does he do these good works, he also inspires others to help him.
We were wondering if we could walk with Zach. They want to do their part. I sort of took my gut. This is giving him a purpose, a dream for me too. I am so proud of you.
One day, there won't be any more homeless kids to help.
Little Red Wagon.
Seems you took it to heart.
He does that.
And what this story reveals is not everybody was on the same page with him. It was too inconvenient to help. And the little boy's message was, I could do something. And he kept sharing that and sharing that and sharing that. And he did. And the movie shows that his family was not on board at first. The mom got on board, the sister wasn't. And then they got, and more and more and more and more people got on board of what was in the heart. And now he's 16 or 17 or something, and he has traveled across the United States walking and raised thousands upon thousands, or I can't remember how many millions of dollars he's raised for the homeless, and there's some places. And so this is just something that somebody started, just like the book back when, just like in somebody's heart. And so as we look, this is the story that epitomizes this generosity, this thing that God did, the ultimate gift, the ultimate story. And so I'd like for those that would like to turn to Luke 2, I'd like a volunteer of who would like to read Luke 2. And read starting at 1, and then when you're done, then somebody else can pick it up until 12. So Luke 2. And this is a whole reason of, why we exist. Because of this story. Just like his story, the little boy's story, just like the little drummer song, just like the Christmas Carol story. This story is true. So with point 1, who would like to read Luke 2? Anybody? Okay. Luke 2, go. Would you like to read?
In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to his own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to Bethlehem, to the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring good news of great joy that will be for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. There will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger."
Thank you. Point number 1, choose to hear good news. That is how we combat all the negative that comes up at Christmas. All the negative, because this is what the angels told the shepherds. Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. You know, when I was listening to the song that we were singing, Little Drummer Boy, you know, and he was saying, you know, the joy, and you know, what can I play for you? A king, what is fit to play? And I could just imagine it. And thinking about this tender heart of that other boy to help the homeless. He was 8 years old. And thinking about this story, there's good news around us, but we have to choose it. We have to choose to listen to it. We have to choose to embrace it, because there's too much negative during this time. And so this story is the good news that will bring joy. Now, there are times that there's a lot that drag us down and we don't have joy. And our purpose here is to bring joy to others, to choose to bring joy to others. And I know how difficult that is sometimes when you're lacking your own joy. And that's why it's important for us in our gatherings, in our time together, our time alone, to pray for each other, that God will bless us with joy. That we will see the good news that's going on. And this is the ultimate during this time. And I think that's why so many people like to go to church at this time. The 19th is close enough to Christmas. There might, a lot of people will be going Christmas Eve. But people's hearts become tender with this story, with this yearning. It starts churning within them. Another year has gone by. Where am I? What's going on? I think I'll try and give this God thing another chance. And so as we start thinking about that, and those thoughts come up, possibly, or we're around the negative, let's choose to hear good news. And this is something that that's not always as easy, but then it's a supernatural God thing. Paul, who was in prison, wrote these words: always be full of joy. He did not have it easy. This guy did not have it easy. He was the Apostle Paul, who was spreading the news. He was a Christian killer, then became a Christ teller. Did not have it easy. And I wanted to share with you about the good news here, that the angels told the shepherds, I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Shepherds were the bottom of the barrel as far as the social ladder was in Israel. They were the outcasts. They stunk because they were out with the sheep all the time. They were menial labor. You didn't need to have really a lot of brains to be a shepherd. They were not intelligent. They weren't the upper crust. And so these people were looked down upon. And if you were dirty because you couldn't take a bath, you were unclean. Then you couldn't go to worship. You couldn't do this. You couldn't do that. People didn't like shepherds very much, even though they provided for sustenance. They were kind of equal. I mean, some people look at other jobs as menial or worse, degrading than other jobs in America. Why? I don't know why. But that's how it was for shepherds. They could use a bit of good news. And I think that's why God chose the angels to go and give them good news, because they needed it. They needed that good news, just like we need good news, just like we're going to come across people who need to have that good news. So always be full of joy. Easier said than done. That's why we need to be around people that are joyful. We need to be around people that can bless us. And that's what the purpose of this light in this community is about. Here, outside of here, doing the different things that we do, and providing. We're going to be having our dinners on us on the 19th. That's another time, just like Thanksgiving, to bless others, to bring joy to other people's hearts. Like last year and this year now that I found out, that's going to be the only Thanksgiving those people will have. There's no other Thanksgiving for them. And so they counted it as a blessing that we were able to provide that for them. And so as we see and hear things, we need our joy cup filled. And as we start getting it filled, let's fill other cup joy. So as we choose to hear good news, those weren't the only people that needed to hear good news. Mary, right? Young, in a cave or shelter, no room in the inn, pregnant, having to be on a donkey. Can you imagine 9 months pregnant? The women here riding a donkey at 9 months pregnant, giving birth in a not so nice place. So she needed some good news. And so here in verse 19, can somebody, well, we'll just read it here. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. You know, some of us have to think about what's going on. And then, as she started seeing that, wow, you know, we don't get it right away. I don't get things right away all the time. We have to ponder them. God works on them. That's what happened with Scrooge. That's what happened with this little boy. He thought about the homeless situation, his mom, his sister, the family, you know, needed to support. There wasn't that support in the beginning. Sometimes we have to ponder these things in our heart. Think about them and how God wants to work these things out for good news. And she was like, gosh, I could use some good news right now. That's point one. Point two, choose to do what God says. Not always easy, man. Are you kidding? Sometimes I want to run away from what God says. It's not easy to do what God says. So, can somebody read that up on the board? Luke 2:15 and 16. Can you read it?
When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger.
So, I was telling you about the shepherds and why sometimes it's just not easy to come outside of your comfort zone to come and do something. And so they said the angel had left them and gone. And they said, well, let's go to Bethlehem. They knew they might be rejected. They might be shunned. They might be criticized. Choose to do what God says. The angels said, go see, go check it out. So they hurried off. And they saw what impacted their life. We never know. I was just sharing with Ron and the team this morning that you never know what's going to impact somebody's life. It could be a simple pumpkin pie. It could be a party at the house. It could be a random meeting. I met somebody at the thrift store and we talked and talked and talked and talked at the thrift store. We hadn't seen each other and I told them I was praying for them and I was so glad to be able to see their son thriving. And so you never know what God is going to choose to bless us with, to bless somebody else, something random. I'm sure the shepherds thought this was weird. What? But they had heard, probably most of their life, that a Messiah was coming. Somebody special. Would they ever dream that they would even be able to be close to him? Acknowledge him? Be part of that? And now 2,000 years later, we're still reading about it during this time. The whole world is reading this story. One way or another. Or they're going to Walmart and hearing the song. Do you hear what I hear? Right? That's playing at Walmart. Or you go to Kmart. Or you listen on the radio. The oldie station. So, this story is still all over. And it impacts different people. Number 3. Choose to share with someone else. Again, we are reading. Who wants to read 17 and 18?
When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what they had been told them
why would they even now? Stinky, dirty, they worshiped, they saw it, and they thought, wow, okay, let's go home, right? Let's go home. I don't want to go tell anybody because they're just going to spurn us. They're not going to believe us. They're going to say, you liars. What the heck? What are you doing? Come to my house all stinky. Or you're making it up. Why and how would you see the Messiah? I mean, really, really. I remember, this reminds me several times in my life that it's happened. You know, I don't always hear this audible voice of God, but I do hear, and he says, you need to do this. Let's do this. You need to continue. You need to persevere. You need to share what's on your heart, whether you like it or not. So one time, different times I've been at meetings, and I said, well, the Lord has spoke to me. And this one lady looked at me like I was some nutcase and said, God speaks to you. This was a church meeting. God speaks to you. And she looked at me like I was some weirdo off of some other planet. And I said, doesn't God speak to you? Don't you communicate with God? You're a Christian, right? Don't you talk to God? And she looked at me like I came off some other planet. And I thought, wow. And over again, I just met somebody last week or the week before at a store, Nutrition World, and somebody said the same thing to them about a mutual friend because she shared, well, God put on my heart, and God said, and they ripped her apart, saying, God didn't tell you this. Why do you think God's talking to you? Why would God single you out? Do you think now that you're going to write a Bible? I was like, what? And this friend was sharing with me this thing, like, can you believe this other Christian's ripping this Christian apart? Because she posted this, on Facebook, and now she's getting ripped apart by another Christian because she felt God put something on her heart to share. Sometimes it's not popular to share what the shepherd shared and what God puts on our heart to share, because we don't like the repercussions. And I'm just as guilty of not choosing to share with someone else. But God continues to make me bolder and bolder and come outside of my comfort zone, just like he did with the shepherds. Just like I know he can do for you. And that's point number 3. This is all God doing this. God helping them. God infusing the heart with his purpose, his love, his joy, his wow, his awesomeness. And so as we continue, this is the holiday season for gifts. And for some people, we have to choose to share with someone else that probably have no clue that God's going to put on our heart during this season. And sometimes I like to think I know who he wants me to bless, but sometimes he uses random things, unexpected things and situations so that we come outside of ourselves, so that we understand reality check. Reality is what we're experiencing today. And sometimes we don't understand our reality because we're too busy and we don't see it like others see us. And so this is where confidant or God needs to come in and say, and that reminds me of something. Years ago, I was a single parent. I was a live-in at somebody's home making barely enough, but I thought I was well off for me and my child. And so I was saving to build my own little house, 24 by 24 in Oregon. That was it was close enough to paradise, which was Washington, but so I'm saving my money. And then Christmas came around, and I've always had a different view of Christmas than a majority of people around me. Different throughout. It's been a journey for me, Christmas. And so that Christmas, my child was about 4, I think. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I just, we were worshiping God, and it's about sharing. And so I had gone to a prayer meeting at a church. And this one woman who was at prayer meeting prayed for a bed. She had just moved into an apartment, and she had no bed to sleep on. She had a chair and a table and everything else like the stove and refrigerator, but she had nothing else in her apartment. So that was like the week before Christmas, and I'm thinking, wow. And I thought I had a bed at one time in my life, and I thought, wow, okay, all of my needs are provided for. And then I happened to go to a garage sale, and there, lo and behold, for $5 was a bed, a single bed. So I bought the bed, and on Christmas Day, it was a used bed, but it was a bed. And I piled it, I had a little station wagon at the time, and I piled it in my car, and I took it to that person's house, this single mom, because that was where my heart was, because I was single mom with her little, I think her child was like 3 or 4, maybe 5. And so I took it, and I delivered it, and she had tears of joy. Something so simple and random that God put on my heart. Boom, and then he found something I could afford, and then boom, the next thing I was able to deliver it. So you never know what God is going to do. Nowadays, he does different things for generosity. And my heart right now is for the homeless. And I don't know how God's going to manifest and how I'm going to do this Christmas time, but that's where my heart is right now. So I'm just waiting for him to direct traffic. Okay, now what do? I don't know what God's going to put on your heart, but I know when we're vulnerable to his leading, he does something we don't expect or we haven't planned. Minute detail in planning. And so we never know. We're going to have our Christmas Eve and Christmas Day at our home, the traditional things, and we're going to do family things. But I know that during that time, sometime, he's going to prompt my heart for something outside of the family, because he always does every year. He does something outside of the family. And, story after story after story that I could tell, but I'm not going to at this time. But just know, you probably have a story to tell of how you blessed somebody and they came back to you and said, man, I was really blessed. And if you don't, then let's start. Let's start. Let God make a story happen so that you have something to share with somebody else. You have that gift of joy to share with somebody else. And so as we continue in our next steps, we think about this during the week, during the time, during formulating things and planning things, and our downtime is, am I thankful for God's love for me and I receive his gift of Jesus? So many people are giftless of Jesus. They're have a hole in their heart during this time. And now's the time to pray during Prayer Warriors. Okay, so they didn't get it in time. I always post on Facebook, and then I got 5 requests the next day for Prayer Warriors from random people all over the country for us to pray. I thought, wow, they're making their public prayer. This is one little thing that we could do. That's another burden on my heart. Another thing that brings joy to people is knowing, hey, they've got somebody praying for them. I choose to become like the new Scrooge, relying on God's strength to help me. Man, is there any other way? I know that a lot of times I'm self-sufficient and I can't keep up anymore. God's strength, the new Scrooge, if you're even there. I don't know. A lot of times we are, in one way or the other. People can see our deficiencies. I was very much aware of my deficiencies this week. People feel free to share them with me about my deficiencies. Are people sharing them with you, or are you not listening? No, we don't want to hear it because we can't handle truth. And sometimes I can't. I can't handle truth very well. But I know that God has to work through me to grow with my truth reality. And so is there somewhere that we need to rely for God's strength? I will proactively be a blessing to who this Christmas season? Who will we be a blessing to? God knows. You might have an idea. Sometimes he puts this burning desire in our hearts. It was interesting. I have a little story to share. Got a couple more minutes. Okay, so yeah, I'm a little addicted to Facebook. I'm trying not to be, but there's so many people that I feel like I minister to. So this week, God put on my heart that song that is, all over the place. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And I heard that song and I thought, you know what? For some people, it is not. It is the worst time of year for them. And I was thinking, I wonder who it is. I wonder who's gonna, who is it gonna be that I'm gonna be have to share with, because it's not the most wonderful time of the year for them. And lo and behold, yesterday, a friend that's on Facebook that used to work at Driftless Market in Colorado posted that very thing. Posted the song, said they cut him at work. He doesn't know what he's going to do now. He doesn't know how he's going to get with his family. He doesn't know anything, because this is going to be the most awful time of the year for him. And I had just had that thought 2 days before. So then I posted and I said, oh my goodness, Zach, I just had this thought. And I said, you're the one that I was supposed to be thinking and praying about. I don't know if he believes in God. But how random is that? You never know. You never know how God is going to bring a story into your life. And so as we continue, next steps, maybe God's going to put on your heart to invite somebody that's going to be tender towards coming and listening to the Christmas story. The Christmas. We're going to have a Christmas program. We're having dinners on us. You never know. Right now, let's prepare and pray. Say, who, God, do you want us to invite to this? Because remember, 30% of the people in Platteville have not heard the story, or it's not active in their life. 30%. That's a big number. That's a big number. So let us pray. Let us think about that. And so as we go for the next steps, is it always easy? No. No. We see that 2,000 years later, that it's all about God helping us where we cannot help ourselves to do the things He wants us to do. And so as we sing our closing song, let us think that, let's review that, and then I will have our closing prayer. And our closing song is, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen.